Okay, perfect. So thank you everybody for attending this video. It's going to be an overall presentation of everything about the expense management solution in Apptivo. So it's definitely going to just be designed for people who have never even heard of Apptivo. We'll talk about everything from the top down as far as what Apptivo as a solution is, then what is the expense reporting offering, how does it fit into the rest of the application, and then of course we'll dive into, well, the details of what is offered in Apptivo Expense Reports. We'll show you around how to just navigate the general Apptivo system, and then we'll actually go in and we'll run through a couple standard procedures as far as submitting expenses and such like that. So let's go ahead and let's start with the first topic. So what is Apptivo? The way to look at Apptivo is it's a cloud-based suite of integrated business applications. So it serves many different purposes depending on the size of your organization and the needs that you have at the moment, what industry you're in, and everybody uses Apptivo a little bit differently. So there's this app store. There's over 50 total applications, and everything's designed to be connected to each other. So at the heart of everything lies the CRM, where you can have a customer database, a list of contacts. You can track your sales leads and such, go track your sales pipeline. And there's other apps like invoicing, project management, we have supply chain applications, there's other financial apps, we do have a general ledger. So there's a lot of these components that they do directly integrate with your expense reports. It's like when you're thinking expenses, I mean, sometimes you have to include expenses on invoices. The expenses are eventually going to have to go get accounted for inside of your ledger. And potentially these expenses are getting related to sales and customers that you're working with, or they're related to specific projects you're working on. So there's all these different sort of interrelationships between expense management and the rest of your business. And that's what Apptivo is really setting out to solve, which is we've now rolled out our one new expense reports app. It's just one report in our platform. But as we progress, you'll see how it does connect directly to the others. So I will be able to record an expense against a project sitting inside of our project management app. But that's the whole idea behind Apptivo, is each app can be used on its own. So absolutely, we can come in here and we can just use the expense reports app, nothing else. But there is no per app pricing or anything. So the whole package is available in a couple different plans, starting at $10 per user per month. And that gives you access to every one of the applications. It's just a matter of figuring out how many users you have. And then you'll be able to determine exactly which applications that they can access inside of the platform. So there's over 50 apps, but I mean, today we're really just talking about the expense reports app. So every app is built on top of the platform. This is a set of common technology. So I'll go show you a couple apps real quick when we hop in there and just give you a feel for how they all kind of look and feel and operate generally the same. That's the first step of integration is, well, there's one website to log into, you get all the different details there. But then you get into this application and there's really like a specific workflow that's designed for expense reports. And that's what we can see here. So the expense reports app allows you to record an expense. So that's just like an individual transaction, like I took a taxi cab from home. Then you are able to group them into reports. So some people do have a process where, like, let's say I'm going to import all my expenses from a credit card and then group them into a report, submit. Then certain organizations need to go through an approval workflow. Sometimes you don't need to do this, so you can just go submit, then go track the reimbursement and everything like that. But we do have a workflow builder, so we can go through and we can go like multiple levels of approvals and such to say that the expense is legitimate, it's coded properly. We have the status tracking to determine how much the employee should be reimbursed and when they should be reimbursed. And then there's different reporting and accounting tools available. So I'll actually show you the end piece where there's the integration with our ledger application. So when an expense is done, I can either go and post a journal into my ledger, or we actually have a QuickBooks export. So it just kind of, it ends the process of taking the expense after it's actually been processed and approved and everything like that, and then actually going and doing the financial accounting for it. So the expense reports app is what it's called, and it's located underneath the financials category. It's currently available in all the plans, so it's really just a matter of the other features you want. Like there's some more advanced security restrictions and such available in the enterprise plans, but the general functionality we're going to show today is available across even the premium plan. Okay, so now as far as, well, the expense reports app, but really the whole platform, it's based on top of a responsive design. So when you're talking about accessibility, that's a big thing in Apptivo. So your employees and yourself, you of course can use the web app. So that's what I'm going to be showing you today, is just going to a web browser, loading it up. The web browser itself, it is a responsive design. So you will be able to go to apptivo.com in a tablet or mobile phone from anywhere. It will respond to the size of your screen, so you can record expenses from there, approve them, do whatever you want. And then we do have a native mobile app for both iOS and Android. So this is more optimized for the touchscreen device. It will integrate with your camera, so it makes it really easy just to snap a photo of a receipt while you're out on the go. And then it instantly sends it off to Apptivo, so if you come back to your desk later on, really easy just to go grab that expense you captured from the mobile app and go include it in a report to submit off to your manager. So accessibility across all devices, really, really key in this day and age. And then also the whole platform has support built in. So yeah, we all know it. Employees, they'll get stuck, they'll have trouble, so they need some assistance. And maybe as an administrator, when you're going through this setup, you want some help in figuring out how to go configure that approval workflow for your business. So we offer some of the best support in the business. It's available 24/7. And of course, we have phone and like online knowledge base and email support. But what's really special is this chat support over here, where really nobody else offers that. So it's built into the application, where if you have any sort of issues or problems, you can actually just ping our support rep right there, and then they'll be able to go and help you out. Okay, so we've kind of talked about what Apptivo is in general. Cloud-based platform, ton of different apps, and today we're talking about the Expense Reports app. And these are just the features inside of that Expense Reports app. So we looked at that overall workflow, and really like there's a million different ways we could slice the app apart. But when it comes down to it, you're really talking about the ability to go and bring those expenses into the system. That includes handling currencies, different tax rules you might want to apply. I'll show you how you can fully customize the system to capture whatever data that you want. Then there's just the accessibility to it. So being able to perform those actions from wherever you want on whatever device you want. So there's no like data syncing or anything like that. If you go capture a receipt from the mobile app, it's instantly available to the web. If you submit something from the mobile app or let's say approve an employee's expense report, they will be instantly notified. There's no delay. Then there's some tools around just like productivity and business rule enforcement. So those approval workflows we talked about, being able to put that into place. Everything that occurs in Apptivo is captured with a complete audit history. So there's this feature called the news feed that'll show you every action that each user has performed. So you can trace exactly when things were approved, everything like that. Then we do have those accounting rules. So really just the interconnectivity between apps is a big item, which is really the next item. And then being able to put in different rules like based on the department that a user is in, they can only submit expenses of a certain type, or maybe you want to change the information captured based on the department they're in. Maybe you want to change the approval workflow based on the department that they're in or the type of expense that they've recorded. A lot of different ways to go and put in here. So towards the end, we're going to talk a lot more about like customizability and how you can do some of these more advanced configurations, but we'll get back into that. Really the last part, this is where we come back to the integration of Apptivo and what really makes us special, what's unique about this expense management solution. It's all about the connection with the other applications. So yep, it's a great standalone app, but one really popular connection for expense management is projects. So we have a full-blown project management system. You'll see when we go record an expense, we'll show you how to capture them against a project, and I could go grab like all expenses for a project. Then there is a ledger and CRM, although you see I've got them repeated twice right here. So the idea is that you will be able to record expenses against a customer. So you can record whether expenses are billable or not. This kind of goes right in with that project integration. And then also being able to email if you needed to ever send messages out or something. There's a full email and calendar integration. If you're on Google or Outlook, we have connections available. So like any email sent or any activity scheduled in the Apptivo system, they're all synced throughout. So we'll get a little bit more into like those collaboration features and such once we hop into the app itself. Okay, so just a couple more minutes and we should be able to go ahead and wrap up this step where we're running through the slides. So we are going to hop into the application. For today, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show them the native mobile app, so I'm going to be showing everything off the high resolution. We'll just show a couple of quick screenshots right here of some of the more popular features that we're going to be covering off today. I mean, really, creating expense reports is just a basic piece, but the ability to input expenses and capture like individual transactions separately from grouping them into an entire report. I'll talk all about that and what's available, but the idea is you can record an expense from any of the devices. Then another really popular feature is the ability to bring transactions in from your credit cards or bank accounts. So I'll show you this piece right here. It's really easy, where connecting an account is just a matter of a few moments. There's a video on YouTube right now for it. You just go type in, like, for example, with Wells Fargo, you just punch in your username and password. Same thing you use on their website. So this is really fast. And what happens is once you connect your bank account, that's just one more way to bring transactions in. So instead of me having to be on the go and capturing a receipt and such right there, I would be able to just sync my transactions in, and then I can go include any one of those credit card purchases directly within an expense report. So I'm definitely going to show you that piece right there. It's extremely popular with the employees because it saves them a bunch of time. Plus it ensures accuracy because there's no way to screw up the amount that was charged when we're pulling it directly from the banking provider. Then approval workflows. So yeah, we're going to get a little bit more advanced here, but what I'm going to show you guys today is I'm going to show you one simple approval workflow. I will give you an idea of how you might start to split them apart and why you might need multiple workflows. And then the same thing on the accounting rules. So I'll just show you one standard kind of basic accounting rule, actually pretty much what's up on screen right now. And then I'll just talk a little bit more about why you might want to implement other accounting rules and some of the more advanced things that can be configured. Okay, so we've kind of given the general overview of everything. For the rest of the time, let's just hop into the application and start showing you around. All right, so I've started off inside of the main homepage dashboard. So it's the very first screen that a user sees when they log in. This is part of the main Apptivo platform. So if you're only using expense reports, that's perfectly okay. You might have just some employees in your company who are only using expense reports. So even if you are using the project management and CRM, potentially you have like this consultant or salesperson. The only thing they do is they come in and they track timesheets and they record expenses, things like that. So this navigation on top, this will be personalized based on the specific user who's logged in right now. So it could potentially just say expense reports with nothing else up here, or it can have any other combination of applications. The user can actually customize this based on what they use the most. So as Edna, I'm logged in as kind of like a salesperson who also works on a little bit of projects. This example company is like a photography business where the examples we'll talk about today is just, okay, I go on site for high schools and universities, and we organize all the different resources to take photos for yearbooks and such. So got to get the whole team together. There's going to be expenses for equipment purchasing, traveling, everything like that. So in this particular example, what they do is they use the CRM to track their sales and quoting. Then they would initiate a project to say, okay, we're taking the yearbook photos for Tustin High School for 2016. Then the project would have a couple different people involved. They're going through the whole planning phases, getting all the forms and registrations. And then on the expenses side, they're going to be recording expenses against that project. So especially on the days where they're going on site, they have all their staff coming in, they'll be capturing these expenses. And then they'll go through their standard approval and reporting and accounting processes at the end. And that would go wrap up everything for that one project. That's the general overview of kind of the scenario we're going to work within today. Obviously, expense reports can be used in a lot of different scenarios. So we're just going to kind of hone in on this one demo company here. And we're going to be picking on Edna today. So Edna is a sales and delivery person. She goes on site. She's going to be capturing expenses for going on site and helping with these photo shoots. So when Edna logs in, she'll see her list up right here. There are some general kind of, we call them contextual collaboration, but there's a calendar, a task feature and such. I'm going to talk a little bit more about these later on. So let's dive straight into how do I get to the Expense Reports app and start capturing an expense. So once you hop in, you just click on your application on top. So this would take me into an app. Now each app in Apptivo is kind of its own little environment. So that's why it's really easy to do just expense reports, is because when I come into an application, it has its own app name up here. You'll see it has its own area of reports. It has its own area for settings, its own trash bin. There's export utilities. There's email notifications in each app. And then everything, like all these little links in the left navigation, they're all specific to expense reports. So what we have is we basically have a bunch of tools that help us either report on expense reports or look for a particular set of expenses. So when you're talking about like what sets of expenses are you going to be looking at? Well, I mean, as an end user, I want to have my list of unreported expenses. So Last night I was out, I took a client to dinner, and I took a photo of my receipt. I recorded it from my mobile app, but I haven't submitted it to my manager yet because I'm supposed to submit weekly. So there's going to be all these unreported expenses that you need to go and batch up. Then there are your reports themselves. So you might be in the process of batching up reports together. Maybe you just submitted one to your manager, but you're waiting for approval. So over here on the left, you'll have a breakdown of just all of your different expense reports and what status that they're currently sitting in. So I can see everything that's currently sitting in awaiting approval, which in this case is nothing, or whatever has been approved in the past. So here I can see expense report number 4 was approved before. Otherwise, if you're a manager, you might also have to be taking part in approvals and such. So you'll get this My Employees expense reports. So we'll walk through this in a moment when we submit one, but I'll be able to see what's currently pending my action, what have I approved or rejected in the past. So this left navigation, it's all just about helping you filter your expense reports. There are ways to go beyond this, so you can do things called custom views. So what we'll do this in a moment, I'll go create one. We'll talk a little bit about the fields, and then I'm going to come back to custom views. So let's go and start inputting a expense, and we'll talk about all the little different nuances and such, because if you're just getting started with the expense reports, there's definitely a little bit of configuration that you have to do ahead of time. I've just done some simple configuration to give us a good example for today. So when you're talking about creating an expense, there's 2 ways to input an expense into the system. So I can record what we see here as an expense, or you'll also hear referred to as a transaction or an expense line. It means a single purchase. So the way Apptivo works is you have an expense report, which is a collection of purchases or transactions, and that's for typically one purpose or one project, although you could do multiple projects. There's ways to do things like that. And then one expense is just one transaction. So when you're inputting, you're eventually going to submit a report to your manager, or you'll go through the standard flow. So we're going to batch them together. But then some people might just come in at the end of the week and they have a list of receipts. They're going to input them all at once. Some people might be using the mobile app and capturing them every day as they go immediately. And all they need to do is just select this week's set of expenses and go include them in the report. So that's the difference you see right here is expense is just going to be a single entry, much faster and easier. And every expense I create goes into what we call the unreported queue. So then this would be, I can go and include anything that goes into here inside of a report later on. And then the expense report, you'll see it has a table. So everything in this table is actually one expense. And then from a report, I can search that unreported queue and include them. And then you'll see the high level information. So the whole report can be submitted off to a manager. I can relate the whole report to a project, to a customer. It'll say who it's coming from, and then how much money and everything is involved. So in this example, let's go through the flow of creating a single expense, and then let's go and group it into a report. Because when you do the credit card integration, which I'm sure some of you might, when you sync your transactions, it's creating a list of unreported expenses. So let's go ahead, let's manually create one unreported expense. This would be the equivalent of capturing a dinner receipt from your cell phone. So let's go ahead and let's just take that example. So we'll say we had a dinner with the client. And I'll just say Jen's Korean barbecue restaurant. So we'll go ahead and we'll categorize our expense appropriately. Say when it was, so I'll just go grab some random info, billable. Yep, we can go upload an image of our receipt. So I'll go grab some document over here. Then what we have is an amount that we'll go type in. So we can just say that, okay, this was that amount of money. You'll see conversion rate is 1, actual amount's the same thing. We do support multiple different currencies. So there's an area where I can go configure conversion rates. And then when I input a amount, I'll select what currency I paid in, and it can convert everything back to the home currency of that user. So the idea is, let's say Edna sometimes travels internationally and she just went to the UK. So she has made purchases in pounds. She would record her expenses and say, I paid this much in pounds. But then when it comes to the reimbursement, she's going to be reimbursed in USD because that's her home currency. So that's the way that whole system works and why it shows the converted amounts and such. So what I just did was I included my expense, nothing too special there. It's going to have the receipt. I can come back, I can make edits. So let's say if I grab the wrong file, I can go grab a different one. So let's just say you take a photo from your mobile phone, it doesn't come through that clearly. You can just take a new photo and replace it. Not a problem. But the idea is it's just kind of sitting there and ready. So that would be okay. We can go through, we can continually capture more expenses. The other way that we're going to be bringing a bunch of unreported expenses in is through that credit card integration. So this is probably going to be the number one way that people bring them in. So what we'll actually get to see is to walk through the connection process, because I don't have an account connected here for Edna yet. So the way that you import a credit card transaction, it's actually a pretty slick process. So you add an account, and you'll see here we just support a few different major banking providers. And then you'll be able to type in, so this is just the same thing that you use on the website for that banking provider, no new sets of credentials. And each employee does this, by the way. It's not like an administrator has to set it up for them. The user can just log in. They can each punch in their own Amex cards or whatever they have. So after this little wizard, it'll just take a few moments, and that account will actually, all of the accounts related to that will pop up right here. So what I can actually do is come through and say which accounts I want to leave. So actually, I've got like my personal account sitting on there. Maybe just this is the one credit card I want. If you just had one credit card, that's all that would pop up. And then once you've added an account the first time, all you have to do is hit this sync transactions button. So what happens is it'll run a little sequence right there. It'll actually download all the transactions. So it'll show you the last time that you downloaded them. And then you'll see that it's filled up my, my account right here. So what I've got is I've got my dinner right there. It's right next to Fitness 19 and such. And what you can do is I can create expense report. So what I did was I selected the few transactions so I can have personal and business inside of here. And then maybe I say, these are my business transactions. So I create an expense report from them. Now you'll notice obviously it doesn't have receipts, but I could go add additional receipts or any information from the manually captured expenses. It'll be right there. So it's not a problem if you, let's say I pay cash for one expense and then I capture that on my mobile phone, but then I also use my credit card for everything else. I can come back and put credit card and cash expenses on the same expense report. Not a problem. So I've batched them all up. The other way to do that is also I can just search and add expenses. So you'll notice when I hit create expense report, if I'm just doing this at the end of the week, I can manually type something in. So let's just say I say taxi to client office. So I'll come back in, I'll say that's transportation, or let's see. I guess this car, we'll leave it as car and truck. So I can manually punch stuff in through the table, upload my receipt, everything like that as we go right here. But then what I can also do is either I can just type in another one manually, or I can search. So this search action right there, it shows me all my unreported expenses. So there's that whole unreported queue, just a list of purchases you've made. So the idea is that you want to constantly be looking at that unreported queue, and you're either going to say this was like a personal expense, I'm just going to delete from the queue, never going to report it, or you include it into a report and you submit it off to go through your business workflow. So let's just go ahead, let's finish off the creation of this expense report, and then we'll talk a little bit more about like searching and the workflow related items after that. So I've got my expense, I'm putting it in here, and we've saw all the individual lines. I think those are pretty clear. I should just quickly mention let's say the fields that you're looking at here. You'll notice like there's no separate field for tax. This is completely configurable. When I show you the customization area, you can change every field. You can change the exact text that's displayed here, the order that they appear in, and the width of these columns. It's totally up to you. Otherwise, you have the section of fields on top and bottom, which are specific to the whole report. So you'll just have the list of individual expense lines. And then we have what we call the header level information, or the report details. So up there, you've got one auto-generated number for the entire report. We're submitting it as Edna. So there's another app called Departments. So there's a bunch of information configured in the Employees app. That's how we're going to determine who the approver should be, which departments it should go through, and then things like the department could go and influence your workflow. So the way that your business workflow is going to operate is heavily dependent on what fields you have set up here. So those of you who are looking for just a simple expense tracking system, you don't need a bunch of approvals. You basically just need to be able to quickly capture them on the go and then just go and pass them back off to the client. You don't have to be too concerned about this area, but some of you are going to be looking to have like different departments and set up one workflow for each department. So each one of these fields you'll see in a moment can be used inside of your workflow editors and the email templates that you send out. It's all just part of creating a better process. So when I'm inputting this, there is a general purpose field. That's just a write-in. So I could just say, I could leave it blank, or I could say, okay, I'm traveling to the company site. There is the ability to track how much money was advanced to a client, or sorry, to the employee. And then down on bottom, you'll see reimbursable versus supplementary amount. So if I say that I have received a $100 advance, I have $96 of expenses currently on here. So it's actually going to say that $383 was supplementary, versus maybe I received a $50 advance, and therefore I need to be reimbursed $46.17. So the system will help track how much money the employee actually needs to be paid. And then you'll just see a couple what we call reference fields. So these are pretty cool. You can actually create more custom reference fields yourself. So we talked about project management, very popular, where I could have, in this case, you see like the school photo shoots. So say a Royal Elementary 2016 photo shoot. So what this is doing is I just searched the project management app. So that would just show me every project inside of that application. And there's a different projects app right up here. Same thing is that project is linked with a customer inside of this CRM system. So it automatically knew which customer it's linked to. And you'll see on the next page, well, now for my expense report, I could go get that customer's address and phone number and everything like that. So that's where things start to get really cool. Then same kind of thing as you have a relationship with a supplier, or you could pick like the individual customer contact that you have. Otherwise, description, tags, these are all just different ways for you to like categorize and put more information, but these are all completely customizable. So you just fill in everything. You see on the bottom, my expense reports, all the summary information is auto-populated, and then I can go ahead and I can create it. So I could create right now and I could submit later on, or I could create and submit immediately. So let's just go ahead, we'll hit create. And now we're looking at the details of an expense report. So if we look on here, the only thing that's been added is this approval status, but we haven't submitted it yet. So nothing's going to be popping up here in a moment. And you also see that there's a couple fields that didn't appear on the first page when generating, like status and approved on. So these will be automatically populated as we progress through the workflow. So right now status is not submitted. That was assigned automatically. And you'll see there's a blue button right up here to move it into the submitted status. So let's go ahead, let's do that. And then we'll go talk a little bit more about, well, these views over on the left. Where does this expense report appear now that it's moved to submitted status? Okay, so we've submitted it. So it just tells us it's done. And that triggers off your business workflow, the approval workflow. Now just kind of keep that in mind. The approval workflow is customizable. So I'm going to show you what workflow I have set up inside of this business right now. But let's just take a quick moment and talk about what the result is, like how this expense will progress. So in this example, I have it configured where it's going to be submitted directly to the manager of Edna. So that's Lori right here. And then Lori, what we also have it set up is she will receive an email. So it'll just say that a new expense has been submitted. Please log in and go check it out. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go log into Lori's email account on another screen. And then you'll see a simple little email template here. So what it'll do is it'll print in any information you want. I'm going to show you this email template configuration, but just the idea is there was workflow configured in the system to pick Lori as the manager of Edna, and then automatically send an email to Lori. Now, we're going to flip perspective. So we're logged in as Edna right here. We just submitted. So we're basically just waiting now as Edna, and we need our manager to approve it for the next step. So I'm going to switch over. I am currently logged in as Lori on this screen. So we've just switched accounts. Now we're going to take the perspective of the manager and just show you what they would do. So I'll go ahead. I'll refresh the page. So Lori's looking at her expense reports. She just received an email. So she's going to come log into the system. And she's going to look under my employees' expense reports. So she got an email that tells her something's here, but then she also has a view. So she can just come here at any time. Depending on the volume, you could be approving them immediately as they come in. Some people or some organizations will run it where like everybody feeds into one finance manager or accounts payable manager. So maybe they log in once a week and approve all expenses or something. It's totally up to them. You just have one queue you go to, everything that's currently waiting on your approval. If you have appropriate privileges, I would be able to see what's waiting on others. So you could have like one accounts payable manager. Maybe they ensure that all the different sales managers and project managers are approving expenses as designed by business policy. So you can go set up things like that. And then from Lori's perspective, she logs in and you'll see she looks at the same exact expense report. Down on bottom, you'll see the approval status is updated. So now, yes, it says it's been submitted off to Lori. And then you'll see that Lori's name is currently up here as the current approver. And she has the options to either reject it or approve it. So the views over on the left, it's pretty straightforward when you're just talking about like 1 or 2 expense reports and everything like that. I want to spend another quick moment and just talk about, like, in some examples, you might have a lot of other information. Let's say I've got 50 expense reports for this one project. Then it's not so easy to manage. So in that case, I might want to look at things a little bit differently. So what this is going to do is this is going to introduce the concept of custom views. So what you're saying here is everything pending my approval could be 2,000. It could be way too much to manage. I mean, even 30 sometimes is more than you want to manage. Maybe you want to have a queue of one particular project and all the expenses pending your approval for that one project. You could also do other things. Maybe I want to show everything pending my approval from the sales department, or just show me every expense from the sales department. Lots of different ways you might want to slice and dice your data. So what you have is the advanced search tool. There's this whole concept called custom views, which means you have the ability to search and filter a list of expense reports based on whatever criteria you want. And with that filtered list, I can organize it however I'd like and save a shortcut. So I can pick exactly what columns should be visible. And then I can go and just save a hyperlink right here underneath my views and optionally share it with everybody else. So let's take that example of show me all expense reports from the sales department. And then I could come through and do some other items like show me them where my name is the approver and the status is in one of these different statuses. So you can put up whatever set of filter criteria you want. Every field you create, even custom fields, it will be filterable in here. So you could search for expense reports, let's say greater than $10,000 if you wanted to. And then you go ahead and you just run that search. This now gives you a filtered list back, and you'd have the ability to change the layout right here. So each app is fully customizable in this way, where let's say I had some custom fields I want to show like that purpose, or maybe advances and reimbursement tracking is really popular for me. So what I can actually do is I can come and I can hide some of that other information. Like I don't care when it's created on, I don't care about the current approver or the customer or project or purpose. So what you'll see is I've just now changed this, and I can even come and do a little bit more work and resize columns and such. So I get this looking exactly how I want, like my ideal little dashboard, and I might have 20 of these, and each person can have their own. And I hit save as view. So I could just say this is sales expense reports or sales expenses. And then if I share it with others, what happens is from here on out, now there's a little shortcut right there. So right out of the box, you're going to have the basic built-in filters. They'll work great for most organizations. For the more advanced needs, you can absolutely create your own custom lists and views in this way. Okay, so at this point, we've covered most of what a typical employee is going to have to do and work with. I mean, they're going to be logging in, get into the app. They're going to be capturing their expenses. They'll use the mobile app, connect their credit card, getting everything prepared and submitting those expenses off to their manager. They might be doing a little bit of work on like the searching and filtering and just navigating around, but generally that's where it ends. I mean, the only thing left for them is saying that your expenses have been approved and you've gotten paid and all that. But there's a lot more going on behind the scenes from a management perspective. So the last 2 areas I want to talk on is more on collaboration and workflow and customization. Because there is like one more general area for employees, but it's not really related to expenses specifically. I do need to quickly show it. So these are those collaboration features that we talked about. So as far as the core workflow, it's all housed by like submitting and approving and such. But there are other ways. Like let's say for some reason you needed to upload some supporting information, like some full documents or photos or anything like that. There's a documents tab right here. You can upload any sort of file. We connect directly to Google Drive, Dropbox, and OneDrive. So I can like add a link to a document as it sits in Google Drive. This would just be an example where like you have, let's say, projected expenses. So somebody has disputed that your expenses were over the projected amount, and you need to go and attach a piece of documentation that shows that this is definitely what you'd expected to spend and you do need to be paid for them. Things like that you might want to attach here. there is a general notes area. So this is a great way, like when an expense gets rejected, they'll be putting in notes right here. So I'd come in and say, okay, need to add the mileage to your vehicle tracking. So I can put that in there, and then the notes is just a system which will timestamp it and add like who posted that. So Lori can come and add a note onto Edna's report, vice versa. I'll just share and collaborate that way. Then we do have a communication log. So phone calls, you're not really ever going to log phone calls against an expense report. You can probably just disable this feature, which you can do that through the customization, no problem. And then emails. So definitely automated emails being sent out, telling people expenses have been approved and submitted and rejected and all that stuff. But then there is some other cases, like maybe you do have to send an email to a client for some reason, or just an internal discussion, like you needed some advice on which category to assign to a certain expense. It does actually integrate with pretty much every email provider out there, where it'll connect into your CRM, so you can come start typing in letters right there. It'll pull every contact immediately from your CRM and employee database. There is email templates available. Not too commonly used here. It's way more common in CRM and such, so we won't dive too far in. The key thing is that you can send email out from here, and then what it does is it does conversation tracking. So if I send an email from an expense report, it'll tag it that it was related to this expense report, and then if there was a conversation about it, it would actually track that in right here. So definitely some cool integration there. Otherwise, you have activity management. So one example would just be, let's say an employee does submit weekly expense reports. They can put a task in for themselves and say, hey, I have a reminder to submit this expense report. Or maybe I want to go create a task that I forgot to capture a receipt, or I left a receipt inside of my laptop bag at the office, and I need to get that in the morning when I come in and capture it. So there's all these little like tasks and to-dos and such. So it's from laptop bag. And the way that this works is that main homepage dashboard, right when we logged in, it shows you all the activities. So you can be working on a bunch of different expense reports, and you might also be working in the other apps like project management and such. And then this one dashboard shows you all of the different activities you have scheduled. So right there, the idea is, okay, I've got to get the receipt from the laptop bag. I came in the morning, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to do that. And then, well, where do I need to upload it? I need to upload it onto that expense report. So you just click that hyperlink and navigates you right back in, and I can come and go attach my receipt onto my expense report right there. So it's a pretty typical task management system. It just has that added benefit of it's directly linked to the data where you scheduled it. So if you have a follow-up with the sales call, you have a reminder on a project or an expense, it just removes that few extra clicks for you. No switching systems and locating what you're looking for. So yeah, we could spend some more time on that. There's tons of videos online and such. So let's get into like the workflow and more configuration side of expense reports. All right. So as I mentioned, when we hit submit on the expense report, it entered the workflow. And in particular, that's the approval workflow. So we're going to go spend some time in the settings for the last 10 or 15 minutes here. And what you'll see is there's two main workflow related items. I mean, there's technically three. It's the field configuration has a plain workflow, but you've got accounting rules and approval flows right here. Accounting rules will happen later. The first thing is going to be approval flows. So what you can have is you could just have no approval, so you could leave it disabled. I mean, a lot of organizations, they don't need to approve expenses. They just need to capture them and go tell customers about them and such. So you can leave it disabled, but if enabled, you need to have at least one flow. And then the flows, you can base them on anything you want. So the details that you capture on each expense report become important here, where you see I've got a corporate, like let's say I always approve corporate ones instantly. Then on sales, I go through a standard approval flow, and then there's just a flow for everybody else in the organization. So if I bring up my sales expense approval flow, you'll see it's got, okay, the name of it and such, but then it has criteria. So what it's saying is this approval flow only applies if the department on the expense report is set to sales. So that's how you use the fields in order to write workflow, because I can select any field I have, such as the project, and then run a different workflow. So let's take an example where I could create a custom drop-down menu in the system, and I could just call it type of expense. And I could either say it's a project-related expense or a corporate expense, regardless of which department I'm inside of. And I could then go select that here and run a different workflow for each one of them. So all of our different accounting rules and workflow items, they're all based around the fields that you configure in each app. So one of the first things you're going to do is you're going to hop in and go pick out the fields you want, and then you'll go and build the workflow around those fields. But as you can see here, I've already got some basic information in there. So I've got it set up where if the department is set to sales, then there's two more areas. So there's a couple different types of approval flows that you have. So there's three options here. We're just going to talk about one. So the employee manager based on spend limit basically says when you add an employee, you'll pick who their manager is, what department they're in, and everything like that. But then you'll also say what is the maximum amount of expenses that they could approve. So what'll happen is if an expense is submitted for their approval, if they're the manager of somebody, but that expense exceeds their amount, they will be allowed to approve it, but then it would get passed on. It would have to keep going up the chain until somebody with the sufficient level of a spend limit is able to approve that expense. Very similar to that, each one of these is always like going to the manager and then going further up the chain, where you could select going to the manager until you reach somebody with a certain job title. So this is how you can do like the accounts payable manager approves everything is, well, I mean, eventually they're going to be sitting in there. So I always send to them. And then you also can just say, well, I need to approve for at least two managers. So let's say the sales manager would approve it, then the accounts payable manager would approve it after them. So I can come in and just set as many levels as I want, and it would continue going up to the next level. In this case, I have a very simple, just the direct manager will approve the expense, and that will complete the flow, is the way we're going to do this. So then what you have is the automations that you can do on each action. So the actions are when it's submitted or resubmitted, or when it's marked as approved, or when it's marked as rejected. I can now perform standard actions, and there's two actions you can perform. So you'll see I've got one of each. So basically I update a field, and then I also send an email. So let's just look at these two real quick. So just like I can write criteria using any of the fields, I can go and I can update any one of the fields automatically. So in this case, I'm updating the status to be submitted when somebody submits it. Pretty straightforward. You could come through and do some other crazier stuff if you want. Then I can come through and I can send an email. So in this case, you could go send an email like always to a standard person, or you could also use what's called attribute. So I've got mine just set up in a test config where Lori gets everything, but you'll see that I can come in and I can say the initial employee who submitted it should receive that email. Or maybe the customer should receive an email that a new expense has just been approved. So I can actually go and I can have multiple emails sent out where maybe in this case, we tell Lori that the expense has been approved. We also tell the employee who submitted it that the expense has been approved. We also tell the customer who the expense is related to that the expense has been approved. So you can start to do some pretty cool stuff like that. And you can also do like team distribution email lists. So I can notify an entire team when a certain event occurs. So this is just kind of based on the standard workflow technology. But then looking through the way that this gets routed, the way I've got this constructed is it'll basically just it'll get submitted from Edna to Lori, which we saw that right now. It's sitting inside of Lori's queue for approval. Now, when Lori approves it, there should be an email sent out, and then Edna the status would be moved to approved. But if I reject it, it just sends a different email that says it's been rejected, and then Edna would need to resubmit it. So you'll see right there, I update it, my status got changed automatically. My approval status will now get updated to show when it was rejected. So, of course, Edna would receive an email. I should have that. Where did my Outlook go? Okay, so then you'll get an email, says it's rejected. And then Edna would be able to come back in. So she'll have everything sitting in her rejected queue. And she can come back, make any fixes. So at this point, once you submit it, you can't edit. But once you get it rejected, I can start editing again. Add notes, fix it. Maybe I forgot a receipt, something like that. And then after my update, I would just resubmit. So it'll track the rejection and resubmission back and forth. So you can see if it has to go back and forth a few times before it finally gets approved. Each step of the way, it will go fire off those new email notifications. So we can see now it's ready for approval again. And then once again, we'll get into Lori's account. Now Lori would see it under pending her approval again. And so long as she is happy with everything, she's going to approve that expense. So this is where we'd go through the multiple notifications. We could shoot it off to the customer, the manager. We could notify everybody involved. And normally that would basically end the expense report. I mean, there's really two more parts of it. And these will also be based on how you configure it for your company. So one is the reimbursement, assuming that this wasn't already done with like a company credit card or something. Like, let's just say if I was using my corporate Amex card and everything's paid by the company, there's no reimbursement tracking involved. It's simply a matter of, from the finance side, paying the credit card. But then there's also the question of actually doing the accounting side. So are we putting it into the Apptivo ledger? Are we downloading into QuickBooks? And what are we doing? Are we splitting apart each expense and breaking it down to the individual categories? Or are we just dumping the entire report into an expense category? So we go through all of those approvals and workflows and such. Definitely you could have additional statuses to track whether it's been paid or not, reimbursed yet or not. And then you'll just see the amount down here will get updated. But let's talk about the accounting. So let's just say we've completed our whole flow. Everybody's paid, everybody's notified, everything's approved. The only thing we have left to do is get this money into our ledger. So now the way that this works is there are what we call accounting rules. And this is pretty cool. So the accounting rules are integrations with Apptivo's ledger application. Now, a prerequisite of this is going to be setting up your chart of accounts, getting to ensure that you have all of your proper expense accounts and everything in here. And then the accounting rule looks pretty similar to the workflow builder. Obviously some slight differences where you can put in like a standard template for the memo that should be posted onto each journal entry as we put it in there. Then you'll see you can post it in based on when the expense was approved or based on when it was most recently created or when it was created into the system or when it was the actual date of the purchase. So you'll choose how you want to choose which financial period to put that money into. Then you can do criteria. So just like you can have different workflow rules, you can have different accounting rules. So depending on which department it had come from, you might want to account it differently, which line of business, which product that was sold, anything like that. You also could do things like sometimes from the financial side, you'll want to move money around before approval. Like let's say you want to allocate expenses to a specific account immediately when they are recorded into the system. Then you want to move that money to another account upon approval of the expenses and indicating that they are all completely finalized. So in this case, you could have post-expense on creation, post-expense on approval. You could say post-sales department expenses on creation, post-sales department. You can have as many different accounting rules as you want here. It is going to be pretty common for businesses just to have a single accounting rule for each application though. So don't be afraid if you only think you need one. So you write those rules. In this case, what you'll see my criteria is when it's moved to the approved status. So the way the workflow builder works is you'll see old and new. So what I'm saying is it's an expense report got updated. So I'm going to check if the old status was anything but approved and the new status is moved to approved, meaning I just approved this, then I want this accounting rule to execute. So this is where you can come in and you can just say whether it was created, or you could even create other custom fields. So there's some organizations who will go through the full approval, but they don't want to post to ledger until the finance team has done their review. So they might add another drop-down menu that says like finance team review complete. And when they change that field, that's when our accounting rule runs. So then down at the bottom, you'll be able to choose what types of journal that you want to post, whether you want to consolidate them. And then the key option here is you can do a single journal or single set of journal entries for the entire expense report, meaning I don't individualize the expenses, or I create one journal entry for each expense line. So the key thing here is some organizations will categorize the entire report and put it into one financial account based on that. In this case, you could say each expense has a different expense category and therefore should go into a different financial account. So that's the difference here. We'll keep it simple. We'll just do for the entire report. And then you select which money is going to get moved around. So in this example, we don't have any taxes or anything like that. So we're just taking the entire expense amount. You could go have other custom formulas and such. So you could be printing out like an amount of tax, and then maybe you need to move that tax into a tax account and then move the remainder, the subtotal, into a different account. So in that scenario, what you'll do is you'll have multiple journal entries for a single expense. So all you're going to do right there is you come and you grab the other financial figure, and then you can see I can move each financial figure to a different ledger account. In this case, I'm just going to do a single journal entry. And then what I'll do is I can debit from an account. You just pick which account. So in this case, I'm like hard coding, or I'm just picking the high level expenses account. So you do have the full list. This will just integrate with everything that's visible inside of the ledger automatically. But then you do have the option, this is more advanced, of picking an attribute, meaning you can have your expense accounts visible. So you're basically selecting the account when you're creating the expense, and then that account contains, that category contains the ledger account. So basically what you're saying is, if I have a taxi and my user categorizes it as a taxi, my accounting rule will automatically go move that money into the taxi expense account. So it's definitely more advanced, takes a lot more configuration, but just gives you an idea of what you can do there. And then of course the credit account, same exact thing there, is you either just select an account or you select an attribute. Okay, so the end result of that is it gets posted on Outward. Really the last piece is if you don't do that, you'll be exporting out to QuickBooks. So this is the example where you come in, you go create a new export based on a specific date range and statuses. So same kind of thing here, just a different flow. So there's some other help articles on exactly how to go and export out into QuickBooks. Okay, so with that, we've pretty much executed the entire expense reports flow. The last thing that I would just want to do for you is give you a quick little tour through some of the other settings available, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up this session. So other than like the workflow and everything that we've specifically run through today, I'm just going to quickly talk about what each one of these pages are. So we'll just spend another minute or two here. So collaboration. Earlier I mentioned you can turn off the call logs feature. So a lot of the features can be disabled entirely just because you're not going to need them in your business. And you can also restrict them so they're only accessible by certain employees. Throughout the entire platform, we have this role-based access control system where there's all these privileges like view expense reports and such. So what you'll see is I could say that the emails feature in expense reports is only accessible to somebody, and I can create a special one. So I could say email. I can create a special privilege called email. So in this app, if you don't have that privilege when I add a user, they don't get to see the email feature. So otherwise, quick links, there's just a little area in the left navigation. You can put like some standard like employee help materials or anything like that. Each of the reports available inside of here, you can disable them or restrict them, just like the features. Tags, there's a bunch of different fields inside of inside of the app. So it just shows you all the fields, they're all configurable. Like the expense accounts that come configured by standard, you can go change them, no problem. Same thing with like the statuses and such. Email templates. So you saw how I was automatically sending emails from my workflow earlier. You can just go build them in there. It's really simple. Like when you wanted to add, like let's just say I want to add the current approver. You just type in whatever message you want. It's a full HTML editor, and then I could come and select any field I have stored inside of here. So I just come down, I find current approver, and then that would embed it right into the email. So pretty simple email template system. Surely you can number based on what's coming from your older system. And then the key things here are master layout, list layout, views, and actions. These are the big ones. Master layout is awesome. This is your field customization. I talked about it a couple times. Okay, adding a custom drop-down menu, removing stuff. So let's say I remove all that stuff, and then I want to add that drop-down menu for expense or type. Look how easy this is. So expense type, and then we said like project related and corporate. So we just do project related and then corporate like that. And then that's all I need to do. So you save that. Now instantly, every time somebody puts in a new report, it'll pop up just like that. All those workflow builders, the email templates, everything adapts around this. So now I could go write a different workflow based on that expense type. Master layout, super powerful, and you can change everything too. So you can totally come down here and change expense date. You can just change it to date to save room. You can change the width of the column in here. That changes the standard. And you can even add individual attributes in here to the table itself or go rearrange them. So everything's totally under your control. You can create custom references to other apps. So I can actually create a field that would search and link to like another contact inside of here. Or you could do like a work order, or you see like a project or a help desk ticket if you want. And then there's like formulas. So I can write a custom formula that does a calculation. Like I could add you wouldn't do like a sales commission or anything like that, but I could add a custom VAT tax calculation formula if I wanted, and then just take the total amount and multiply by 20%. So lots of different things you can do there. The list layouts controls the searching. So when you're looking through a bunch of expense reports, the reason mine looks all nice and kind of compact with that information is I've just customized my list layout. So any field you put in, you can display inside of here. That means I could go configure my my new field. So we just added the expense type. So I can add that in there, and now that instantly becomes visible inside of my list layout, like that. And then the last piece is views and action security. So views is just your left navigation. So a lot of stuff is drag and drop. You can just go rearrange stuff as you see fit, disable things that you aren't using. So you'll notice I shut off a couple right there. You can also change your default homepage. So maybe the default page right when you come in, what you want to see is you would like to see all of the expense reports pending your approval. So now every time I click on expense reports, it comes straight to pending my approval. So just little shortcuts like that. And then just very granular security controls. So just same thing as you notice every action, like whether you want people to delete expense reports, export them, anything, it can all be restricted to a particular type of user. Okay, so that's going to go ahead. That's going to wrap up our session for today. So thank you very much for everybody for attending, and hope you found it useful. So best of luck, and we'll see you next time.